friends, and welcome back to another episode of Your Bish Therapist podcast. And today I have one of our most favorite people on the planet. Please welcome back Mandy Slutsker. Hi, Mandy.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
Of course, you are a fan favorite and people love us together. You know, we are Eminem twinsies. And
speaking of Eminem, did you see that he's going to be a grandpa?
No.
Yeah. So his daughter who got married this past summer is pregnant and gave him a jersey, a Lions jersey that said grandpa on it. And it was all recorded and he released it as part of a teaser for a new song that's out.
Okay. I've never felt so old in my life.
I know. That's what 50 Cent said.
That Eminem is a grandfather.
He's going to be, hopefully, as all goes well.
Yeah, well, of course. And I mean, what a blessing. Mazel, congratulations.
I know, Haley.
But I know, sweet little Haley, who we all perpetually think is like 4 years old. She's a full-blown adult, married, wonderful human being. So congratulations to Haley and Grandpa Eminem.
Also, I was reading and I think she graduated with a degree in psychology. So,
oh, well, given what I know about Eminem, that would make a lot of sense. Which I should say his real name is Marshall Mathers. And, you know, he had some troubles when she was young. And so I'm sure she had
a lot of troubles. And you know, he's done a really amazing job to overcome and to prioritize his family. And I'm
sobriety.
Very impressed. Yeah.
He's sober. He talks about being sober. He's still so talented. Who knew, again, that as of right now, Eminem, Snoop Dogg, and Flava Flav would be men goals? Like, whoever would have thought that?
I know.
Because in like the early aughts, they were like, hide your kids, hide your wife. So let's, you know, it's just a wild turn of events.
Yeah, my mom was not a fan. Well, I remember she asked once when we changed the GPS. Remember when you used to have like a standalone GPS in your car that would talk? So my brother and I changed it so it was Snoop Dogg's voice. And it was like really confusing to my dad because he wasn't saying like turn right or left. He was like, go like Lizzle or like instead of like left and stuff. My dad's like, what the hell is this? And then we're like, oh, it's Snoop Dogg. My mom's like, is that the white one? It's like, Mom.
No, the white one.
Yeah, that was a
parent. As they say, parents just don't understand, right?
Right. Oh man.
So today and thank you for that little hot tip because I had no idea. So thank you for that. So today, what we're going to do is we are going to have. This episode is chock full. We're going to talk about Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, and then we're going to talk about Real Housewives of OC, and then we're going to talk about Real Housewives of New York premiere episode. So let's get into it because we all know that Mandy and I really have a Kiki, and my goodness, can we chat? So let's start with Salt Lake City. And one of the first things that I want you to talk about is how so Real Housewives of Salt Lake City is back, and you and I were talking about this, and you said it's one of your favorites. You're really loving it. So please talk about that.
I find it so interesting, just the whole culture of Utah and specifically the culture of Salt Lake City, which is like a merging of the Mormon religion with kind of modern day culture. And I don't know, it's just so interesting to me. And it's also, I find the women very funny. I don't think they're attempting to be funny. I find them very funny though.
Okay.
And so
that
like,
I can relate to, yes.
An argument about bath bombs. And then Meredith Marks making bath bombs in her kitchen that she looks like she doesn't know her way around in. And then all the kids and her sounding like they're on Xanax is very funny to me. Like I just love it. Everything they say is funny.
A lot of low energy in the Brooks house. Is there not? I mean, like the way of speaking, the low kind of vocal fry, like drawn out. I do notice that it's such, I don't know if it's low energy or chill energy, but either way, that's such an interesting observation.
I think it's chill. because they definitely have energy. Because like Brooks Marks is all over the place in New York, working on his fashion line. I saw him at BravoCon. He was literally the best skin of anyone I've ever seen. Yeah, and he was just very nice and like a sweet kid. You know, I know he's not a kid; he's an adult, but I like Meredith a lot. I'm really excited about the bat mitzvah storyline.
Yes.
I feel like it is very genuine. After October 7th, and all of the horrible things that have followed that, there has been just a huge rise in anti-Semitism. There always has been anti-Semitism, but it is like full throttle, and especially in the online spaces, and especially if you are, a public figure who is Jewish and identifies yourself as such. Rarely does Meredith make any, talk about Israel or anything like that. She's saying, I want to get bat mitzvahed, and people are sending her these horrible messages and writing these like terrible things. And it's like, she's talking about her religion,
And she's talking about her sense of spirituality and how that plays out. And what I will never understand, never, I will die on this hill, is that why people care about what other people are doing, what they're doing with their bodies, what they're practicing, as long as it's not harmful to self or others, why do we care? Well, first of all, why in a bigoted way? I love that you care, and I care too, because first of all, when I was growing up, I grew up Catholic, but I lived in an area where a lot of my friends were Jewish. And I actually, I grew up and I kind of thought, I was like, wait, are we Jewish? And I was kind of devastated when we weren't. But so my point is, I participated in a lot of, seders and bat mitzvahs and bar mitzvahs, and they're some of the best parties I've ever been to in my life, even as an adult, truly. And so I'm picturing when Meredith is talking about this bat mitzvah, because for girls it's bat and for boys it's bar. So just wanted to be clear about that, because sometimes people get confused about that terminology, but I'm picturing what this would look like. And I'm like, I am here for this.
Yeah.
I would love to see a Meredith bat mitzvah.
Me too. And especially in her way of speaking, where she doesn't really move her mouth a whole lot. Like, how is she going to chant the Hebrew in the Torah? I don't know. I don't know. It feels like she's swallowing her words half the time. But I really love Meredith. I actually like all of them, even when they're in arguments with each other. I never feel like it's so intense that I have to choose a side. Not that I ever feel like I have to choose a side, but Whitney versus Lisa. I'm like, oh, Lisa's pissed because you said not nice things about her publicly. You went out of your way to do that. You didn't have to do that. But they are your feelings.
Her feelings.
And it's
her hill and fill-in journey.
Fill-in.
Yeah.
And it, she is entitled to them, right? And it's not lying to share your feelings. So I see both sides, but I also am I don't know, I just feel like all the drama is so low stakes. It doesn't.
Okay, so that you pinpointed for me why this is my least favorite franchise, because to me, for my clinical brain, I like a lot of meat on the bone, so to speak. And listen, I'm not much of a meat eater, so that's a gross example, but you get the point. Is that I like OC and other franchises give me so much. And I feel like Salt Lake, for me, feels performative. It feels silly and kind of dumb. But that's exactly, and it just goes to show that our perspective is our reality, right? Because that's exactly why you're saying that you love it. And that's why I'm saying it just doesn't give me a lot. But that doesn't mean it isn't funny and entertaining. So I definitely see that point. But I think for me, what you said, that just knocked that loose of maybe why we have that difference in perspective.
They do have deeper things that happen, but it's more in the confessionals, things we find out about them personally that feel layers of an onion. So finding out Mary Cosby, things about her mom putting men before her and her, siblings, and that it was a terrible feeling. And she promised she would never make Robert Jr. feel that way. I'd never really heard anything from her about her relationship with her mom. So
well, you know why that is? Because Mary never participated. So that, and that's why she annoys me. But yes, like she has complexities to her that when she shows up and opens her mouth and participates and doesn't behave entitled, like she's different or better than people, then there is definitely depth to her. And so I appreciate that for sure.
Yeah, there's just like lots of like little things, that, and in terms of pathology and, I'm no expert, but the new girl, Brittany, is definitely giving. And for her to like, talk about, she's in her late 40s and to talk about a man this way is
wild.
A choice. And
it's a choice,
it is a choice. And she is choosing to elevate the men in her life and maybe not her children. And when she said that her daughters don't speak to her, I was like, oh, okay, there's a story here.
Yeah.
And then it just made me think of like all of the housewives who have children that don't speak to them and how it seems to be a higher percentage than the general population of women.
I'd agree with that.
So,
and I think that it's interesting because I'm not going to be specific because I don't want to get us in trouble, but the folks who have estranged relationships from their children seem to also be the folks who are the most performative, the most interested in fame, the most interested in, having Bravo or Housewives as their higher power instead of, the other much more important things to life. And so here's the thing. I felt like the need to stand up for Brittany in this episode, but also I definitely agree with you. There's for sure some stuff there. And there's an energy to her that like people don't just happen to find themselves in these toxic relationships. So I've been covering Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, and I've been talking a lot about Taylor and Dakota. And I believe that Taylor is looking for unconditional love that she didn't receive as a child. And so she's looking for that in these relationships. And so we don't know what Brittany's story is, but like her obsessively trying to get Jared Osmond on the show, which is like, if your ace in the hole is Jared Osmond, bro, you have troubles. That is a troubling card. Like, not a fan at all. We've seen tons of stuff on the internet about how Jared Osmond has been like, he's like making Brittany look terrible, but also like she's doing that really well on her own. So two things can be true, but I just feel like, he's dishonest, he's manipulative, but she's also making a choice to stay in this really toxic on again, off again, like, please make me your girlfriend. And it's like, hey, you're an adult. You're an adult woman. You are more than just your man. Like, are you Alexis Bellino? Like, what is happening here? Can we stop being so childish and adolescent? That definitely did bug me. I will say I did clock that.
Yeah. And at least Alexis Bellino is claimed by her man. You know what I mean?
Oh, dang. Man, with the ring.
It's like, stop. Like, it's just embarrassing. Like, get help, please. If this is how you're talking about someone and so desperate and I don't know, something just seems contrived and not authentic at all about her relationship. Like, I don't know that that's the backstory that we're getting is like the truth.
Yeah, I think, like you said, you used that great example of peeling an onion. And I think we're going to see more of this onion being peeled. And I have a feeling it'll be scary to see what's underneath. But, I did think it was wild, by the way. I want to hear your thoughts on this, where Bronwyn and Angie were literally talking behind her back. And again, that's the stuff that annoys me because I'm like, are you 12? Like, why? I just didn't understand that,
I feel like Angie is naturally aloof, like not in a bad way. Okay. It's just like part of who she is. Okay. So she may not truly be realizing that what she's saying is within earshot of the person she's saying it about.
That's wild because Brittany she couldn't have been more than 5 feet in front of her.
I know. Maybe she secretly wanted her to ask a question because she didn't know how to approach the situation. That's another possibility.
That's true.
And Bronwyn, I think, is not afraid to be messy or really direct. Not.
So what do you think about Bronwyn? Let's talk about that because, the first couple episodes, I don't care for like the high fashion. I think that's that just doesn't, I'm trying to be not judgmental, but for me, that is just not where it's at for me. Like the big heart coat and like, the chairs that were in the Guggenheim. And I just don't, to me, that gives off an ick, a feeling of, inauthenticity. But then at the same time, I agree that, what you're saying is she's very self-assured. She's confident. She, there is a part of her that I like, but there is also that, I would say, pretentious, perhaps. She gives off a very pretentious vibe, which for me personally, I'm just not a huge fan of.
I really like her, but I can see where you're coming from. What I enjoy about her is it doesn't feel to me like it's these brands on brands on brands, because I don't know a lot of the brands, and I don't know. I learn it through Housewives, but like it's not that impressive to me when you have Chanel all over your body or Gucci all over. Like that doesn't feel like fashion. But something like a heart coat does. I'm like, ooh, that's different. That's something I haven't seen before. Or she posted on Instagram this like work kind of suit. Like it was red, but it had ants on it, like little ants all over. And I was like, that's so different. That feels like art more than like dressing for other people so that they know how much money you spend. It seems more like, and her whole house feels very artsy in an interesting way that I haven't seen. Like I think a lot of housewives really like to play up the kind of modern farmhouse thing, and she's just not afraid to be like, I like big, bold, bright colors. And I'm like, certain types of unusual art pieces or furniture pieces, and I'm going to buy them because I have the money to. Like, I'm intrigued by it. It's not something I've seen before, which is why I like looking at it.
And, Mandy, this is why we love you, because that is such a good point. And it's like, seriously, the listeners love you because you bring out points that even I didn't think about. And listen, now maybe I changed my mind, because you're totally right. I don't like the Angie K Greek flag Gucci the Teresa Giudice. I don't like that. To me is not fashion. That's silly.
I don't think Angie would call it fashion either.
Well, fair enough. That's
I think she'd be like,
true.
No, I'm just trying to get the attention of this extremely famous Greek basketball player so that he knows how proud the Greek community is of him, which I'm sure he's unaware of since he's called the Greek freak.
Yeah. And Angie, people from space saw that. Okay. NASA knows. So just, relax with that. But that is an interesting point. And you're right. I actually, in my head, this is how my brain works, and it's magical and also very weird. But I pictured Delia Dietz from Beetlejuice when I look at Bronwyn's house and her fashions, but not in a shady way. Like first of all, Catherine O'Hara is one of my favorite people in the entire known universe. Everything she's in, she is amazing. And Delia Dietz was one of the most amazing characters in Beetlejuice. And now Beetlejuice, the sequel, the long-awaited sequel, is out. And so it did give me that whole Delia Dietz, very cool though, very, again, appreciating art and in the spirit of being unique and different instead of, Whitney's house and the more Secret Lives of Mormon Wives house, where it's like that modern farm, like anyone can do that. But she does seem to have this cool artsy style. So I love that.
I like it. I like someone who's not afraid of color, as I wear all black right now. But normally I'm also not afraid to wear color. And so
you wear such fun things sometimes. And I'm like, oh, you look so great. I love that.
No, I just like fun, bright things normally. I mean, when the weather is gray, for me, it's kind of hard to pop. But I just find her interesting to look at and to watch. Like I am in.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Well, I guess we'll continue to see how this all plays out. And now I will be looking at her through a little bit of a new lens. But before we move on to anything, we definitely have to talk about, you were talking about how Mary, now that she's opening her mouth, we're learning things about her family. Well, we also learned that her dad was from Milwaukee and lived a street away from Jeffrey Dahmer. And she claims that he smelled the smells. And I'm like, what is with this family and smells and odors? And that he witnessed the media circus that followed. My jaw was on the floor. I'm like, Mary Cosby, what secrets are you hiding? Open that mouth, girl. Show up and talk to us more, because you are interesting.
Mm-hmm. What year was Jeffrey Dahmer.
Oh, gosh. So I was going to write this down and then I completely forgot because I am obsessed with serial killers and I've watched every Dahmer documentary there is. And so I do know that
the 80s or the 90s or earlier. I'm gonna look it up.
Look it up. Okay, great. Because he was from the Midwest. And, I'm a Midwestern gal myself. And so he lived in Illinois and then it was Milwaukee. And so when he was in Milwaukee, when was it?
So he killed people between 1978 and 1991. So I'm assuming he was caught in 91, date apprehended in 91. So my family on my mom's side is from Milwaukee. And so I was born there. And then when I was 5 months old, my parents moved to Minneapolis. So I'd never really knew Milwaukee, but I would go there, multiple times a year to visit my grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, everything like that. I definitely have no recollection of anything. Obviously, I was too young, but I don't remember it being tied to Milwaukee, which is weird because...
you would think that's something that would stick out, being born and spending some time there. But I think from what I've watched, it doesn't stand out as Milwaukee because he killed people in different places and he kind of moved about. And so, and also, here's the funny thing. I said, I'm from Illinois, a suburb of Chicago called Downers Grove. And I said, I'm a born and raised Midwestern gal. And a girl's trip to Milwaukee in the winter is a bold choice. It's a bold move. I just thought that was very interesting. Like, why don't you want to go somewhere warmer? You're in Salt Lake. I don't know. But Milwaukee and the Midwest, it's such a fascinating place. So culturally rich in indigenous heritage. As Heather talked about on the episode, it's pronounced Milwaukee. And that is the native
Algonquin.
indigenous Algonquin. Thank you. And so I loved hearing Milwaukee talked about with, some historical context, not that Dahmer is historical context. So we got some other historical context because Milwaukee's a beautiful place.
I thought it was fun. And I know someone whose head is in the Bobblehead Museum.
You do?
Yeah. Family member. So my cousin, his brother-in-law is like a huge fan of the UW sports, especially basketball. And he also happens to have some like disabilities and still lives at home with his parents and stuff. But he goes to like every game and he's just like this incredible, he's almost like a mascot kind of because he just like cheers so much. He goes all the time. Like they love him. The crowd loves him. The players love him. And University of Wisconsin, I guess, they worked to get a bobblehead of him. And so he was like giving out bobbleheads and he's in the Bobblehead Museum. His name is Michael Pohl. So if any of you guys ever go to any of the, games, he's a huge fan.
Michael Pohl in the Bobblehead Museum. And I love that story. Thank you so much for sharing. How cool is that?
He's so positive and lovely. And, I've known him for now since 2009, since when my cousin got married.
Wow. How cool. I love that. Please send my best. And, that is amazing. I love that for all of you.
I was like, I know that Bobblehead Museum. Michael's there.
No, that is seriously so cool. The last thing before we move on, I just wanted to say that, I have this drama triangle that I use on my social media to talk about, the different roles that these women put themselves in. And so the last thing I wanted to say is that this triangle is getting a workout, honey, because between OC and Salt Lake and New York, but in this episode, I perceived that with the whole jewelry line, nonsense, whatever that was. So Meredith is triangulating Heather to it's very interesting how Meredith to me went about that. She's like, well, I'm not going to talk to her about this, but you should talk to her about this. And then, so it puts Whitney in this victim role where I don't think she needs to be. So I just found it was interesting that, sometimes when we do things because we don't want to get involved with the drama, we end up causing drama. It's just a little bit more subversive. But it's really a lame storyline about, a who cares jewelry thing. So it's not the end of the world. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like Meredith does this every season. There's like some rumor that like no one's really talking about that she brings up as if everyone's talking about it. It's very different than in OC when the lawsuit dropped from John Jansen to Shannon. We all saw that. That's something I even saw, and I don't follow as closely on like Bravo account news. And so it's like how many accounts really did tag her? This didn't, I don't remember this, and so I don't think it was like as big of a thing. So I don't know. Yeah. At the same time, I do feel like Whitney does like mess around with things a bit. Like she takes information and she boggles it up. I don't know if it's on purpose, but when she restates it, it comes out differently than how she heard it. And I do feel like it's a little bit similar to Brynn, where she's just like this cutesy, like, oh, I'm just all fun and giggles. And then, people get frustrated because she runs her mouth and she says things and it's like, why are you saying this? But so maybe everyone else is talking behind someone's back and she's the one who brings it to camera, but I don't know.
Well, listen, that's a great segue, because let's talk a little bit about Brynn and New York. And, because I feel like, so I have this theory about Brynn that it's interesting how you say it is similar to Meredith, because I do agree with that. But to me, Brynn...
To Whitney.
Oh, I'm sorry, to Whitney. Thank you. Yeah, see, this is why I need a co-host, because I'll misspeak and I'll have no one to correct me. So yes, thank you for that.
Not good.
So with Brynn, I feel that she has what I call a sexy baby routine. And the reason that I call it that is I'm a huge 30 Rock fan. And have you ever watched 30 Rock, Mandy?
Yeah. I haven't watched like all of it, but
okay.
I'm familiar.
I'm obsessed. I watch it like every night. It's one of my comfort shows. I just think it's brilliant. And there is this episode where they have this writer come in and she's acting like a sexy baby, but it's really to protect herself from this like stalker that's trying to kill her. And then it's like it gets found out and it's this whole thing. And so this is a long story short, is that Brynn, she was the subject of such severe neglect as an infant, parental neglect as an infant, like literally laying in her crib days at a time, not responding to cries, not having her diaper changed. And, her parents had substance use issues. And then, she told her story last year about how she went into foster care. And so my point is that when we experience that level of neglect as infants, there is a biological shift that happens in terms of it's not even we believe our needs aren't going to be met. It's like a physiological fact. And so the trauma that causes, I believe, leads Brynn to behave in this eternally seductive way, because I think, Brynn, until you do the work to work on how did these terrible things that happened to me impact me, we're going to continue to recreate. And so what I think Brynn has recreated is the seductive facade to get people to love her. And it's sad because she doesn't need to do that. And in doing that, I think she does things that actually irritate people. For example, just like what you said, talking behind people's backs. She's saying things, but not exactly how it was said. And I do feel there's some manipulation in that with Whitney and with Brynn. I think that's when it happens time and time and again, what that tells me is that behavior is purposeful, if that makes sense. So that's kind of my thought on Brynn. I don't know. What did you think about her and the season premiere and all that?
I definitely think that is part of it. I also think, like, especially when she acts like seductive and cute and flirts with people, I think it's sort of like she's on a shelf and she wants to be picked. And, pick me and don't bring me back to the store. But when she is gossiping, when there are no cameras and she's like one-on-one with people and talking about everyone else who talks shit, I think she's actually trying to manufacture drama for the next season, because I think her and the rest of the cast are hyper aware that they are housewives, that they are on a housewives show, that it has to be entertaining. Like they're so focused on it in a way that I think actually harms the show. No, I don't know how much of it. Part of me was like, is it age? Because they're younger, so that they like are more, they're not so aloof. They're very like in touch with social media and their, optics and perceptions. But then you've got Bronwyn, who's 38, who seems like aloof as hell. So, I'm kind of like, maybe it's just they found people who are just very hyper aware of their image. And if you're so focused on your image, you're not going to be as good of a housewife.
1,000%. I think that to me characterizes this. RHONY was such an iconic franchise, one of the most, right up there with OC, right? And so when we had all these legends, and in fairness, sociologically speaking, if we're looking at like the psychology behind this, it's like we took all these legends and then we brought these newbies in and we said, perform. And that's what they're doing, right? They're like, well, we got to perform. We got to be the new faces of New York. We got to get people to like us. And here's the thing, going back to Brynn, I always say that if we don't work on issues, we end up recreating those in our life. And I find it so fascinating that Brynn is on a show where she's trying to convince people to love her. And that is exactly what she's doing her whole life. And so to me, there's no coincidence that that is why she's on the show. But to your point, there was this, it does feel disingenuous. It does feel very performative, like Salt Lake, but in a quieter way. And there was this one scene where Brynn and someone else, they were at the bar and Brynn was literally like posing. Like she had this, and listen, she's gorgeous. She has a beautiful body. She had this, it was like a fishnet dress with just like a thong underneath. And listen, her body looked amazing, but she was like clenching and like flexing. And to me, it just felt she was so aware that cameras were there. And I'm like, that's the stuff for me as an audience member that just takes me out of it, And it sounds like for you, kind of, that really resonates with you.
I mean, what's interesting is when someone is not good at that. Like, I think Erin is an example of someone who is aware that the cameras are there, wants to come off a certain way. And because she wants to come off a certain way, she doesn't. And it's like very easy to see through. And so I actually find that more interesting because we're going to see things crumble. Like she wants to act like she is the perfect family and the perfect marriage and the perfect friendships and and she just likes to show that, but she doesn't because no one does. And we're going to see it kind of fall apart a little. And I'm excited for that because I want to see her be really authentic. And I think we have seen her be authentic a couple of times, but it's usually emotions that are a little bit different than what we normally see from her. So when we see her really angry or when we see her really sad, those I feel more honest than when she's kind of putting on a happy face. So I think she is not as good. I think Jessel is just Jessel. And I like her the best because I don't think she knows how to perform for the cameras in a way. And and she, at least now everyone's in on the jokes. Like she has a sense of humor that we did not understand when we first started watching the show. Agreed. And we got it partway through and we got her husband's sense of humor too. And now we're like, oh, these two quirky people. And it doesn't feel as put on. And everyone else feels a little bit put on. I totally agree. Pavitt for president, by the way. I freaking love Pavitt. I love him. He's so funny.
He's just like, he's funny and he's just, he's interesting. And, I agree with you. I think Jessel, we just didn't know her. And now we kind of understand her dry sense of humor or, lack of just expressiveness. It's kind of very like quiet and dry, but so is Pavitt. And so I think that they're great. But with Erin, I did see someone else said that they feel she is the Heather Dubrow of New York. She's just trying to like self-produce and it's painfully obvious. But to me, when I watched Erin on the screen and I'm watching her and Abe and she says, are you dumb? And I'm like, oh, there is some stuff simmering under the surface here. And I cannot wait to see what this is because, I've done couples therapy for a lot of my career. And I just know there's certain things that when you hear that or when you see stuff, you're like, oh, there is stuff going down. And so I feel for me, Erin's energy was just so awful because not only is she grieving because her mom was diagnosed with breast cancer and she's undergoing chemotherapy. And you could see the pain in her face, like as she talked about even trying to talk to her kids about that. She couldn't even tell them, which is also interesting in terms of how she processes things. And like, that's a wild thing to not tell your children, you know?
Yeah.
But, I have cancer and I get it. Like I have two nieces and a nephew, and my one niece is old enough to know, but the other two are young. And like, I'm not going to stress them out and, tell them things that they don't understand. So there is part of me that I get it, but there is also part of me that's like, that's an interesting problem solving strategy.
Yeah. Part of me wonders, like, have they had to handle other really tough things? And so she doesn't want to add another tough thing onto it, like I don't think it's easy for any parent to have children that are of a minority group or anything like that. I can't imagine what it's like raising, Black children, given the state of everything with the police today. And it's really difficult. I know just from talking to family and friends raising Jewish children right now in this environment.
I mean, fair.
And her parents are Israeli. So,
and her dad just died.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I feel so. Yeah.
And I feel like he was deteriorating probably throughout, like she said that he was deteriorating. So I don't know how long he was sick or what it was or, but I feel like with like that going on and then like the stuff in the world happening and, even just being, and I don't know her parents' like background of like where they were before, but, starting at age, I don't know, like I never remember not knowing what the Holocaust was ever.
Right.
Like since the beginning of And so like, that's a lot for a kid. I didn't realize that until I was much older. And we were starting to learn about things in school, and especially in high school. I was like, you guys don't know about this shit? Like, you know? Like people kill each other a lot for no good reason. And, there's just like a lot of, generational trauma in Jewish families. And so that's something I'm familiar with. I'm not familiar with like other groups, but so I'm, quite kind of like, is there anything there?
Yeah. And listen, again, why I love you. Super good point that I did not think of. I thought of it, but what I thought was that it was something with her and Abe, that there had been underlying stuff that the kids were exposed to, but you bring up such an important point about the generational trauma and the state of the world and being Jewish. And so thank you for bringing that perspective, because I think you're totally right. That makes so much sense.
Like there is not, like if you send your kids to a Jewish school or they go to Hebrew school, like there is not a child that hasn't been through a bomb threat and that they know exactly why the bomb threat is specifically at their school. Yeah. They, getting shouted at. I mean, at my synagogue, which is in the middle of Washington, D.C., there are people outside that will shout at people walking towards the synagogue.
That is so Shabbat. Crazy to me.
Yeah.
That is
people
so
like,
crazy.
And like, say really horrible things completely unrelated to practicing your religion. So, I'm just like very hyper aware of that. And I've heard a lot of things from parents about like really wanting to shelter kids in a way because they just don't want them to know how harsh the world is at such a young age. So that's just something that's been on my mind a lot lately.
Well, thank you for sharing your experience, strength, and hope. And I adore you. I stand with the Jewish community. And, I just thank you for bringing that up. And I send my love to every Jewish person listening to this because, it does feel like the world is on fire and the hate and the bigotry is just so out of order. So, but again, this is why we do what we do, right, Mandy? Because it's like, it's not just about housewives. It's about this other stuff, this other important stuff that's so important to talk about. And so everything that's going on with Erin, what I could just tell is her grief and pain are palpable. Yeah. She is in pain and she is grieving. And the wild thing about grief is that it's not just grief. There's like no grief bucket. So it's not like you just grieve about this one thing over here or this one thing over here. Grieving is it all touches the same wound. And so whether it is grief about the state of the world and living and being Jewish in the world and maybe the state of her marriage. And it seems like we're going to find out some stuff that's going on there. And so I just think that she is overwhelmed, and all of these scenarios may be touching that pinpoint of grief. And when that happens over and over, we can just get really irritable and frustrated. And like, that's the energy that I see from Aaron, if I'm being honest.
Oh, for sure. When he brought up the mushrooms, I was like, chill out, girl. Like, it doesn't, I don't think he's like a kind of dad that just sits and like trips out all the time. Like, he seems like an engaged father. Like, you know, you seem like an engaged mom. Like, this is not, you know, it's also not, I don't know, the early 2000s. Like, no one's prude about drugs anymore, you know?
No.
Like, people are just like openly,
in their coffee.
They're like talking about mushrooms. They're talking about ketamine. I'm like, I had no idea until the pandemic how many people did ketamine. I was I didn't realize this was like a for fun thing.
I knew. Yeah, I knew. It's been a thing for people for a while.
It has been. And I just, you know, it just kind of didn't permeate the zeitgeist for people who were unaware. And, you know, until then, someone like, you know, Matthew Perry coming out and talking about that, and then him, you know, passing away. And there's just so many, it's just interesting how she just, I don't know. I think she wants, I think, herself and her family to come off a very specific way. And you just cannot control exactly how you will come off or your family will come off on camera. It's just not possible. So it's really nice to see someone like, like an Emily Simpson, who just seems to be like, this is it. This is me. This is my husband. This is our marriage. These are our kids. These are our problems. And not try and like her kid the other week, they were saying, well, what gift should I bring to this dinner party? And her kid says, pot.
Oh, that's
and
right.
like her and Shane just like laughed, you know, and Shane was like, you probably want to make sure they're like pot before you would bring pot.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
But it's just, you know, and just like to see the difference. And that probably comes with like years of being on camera and of just, I don't know, like being confident enough in who you are on TV and who you are as a person and how your family is to just let it all be out there. But most people aren't like that.
It takes a lot of character building because I can speak to this from a personal level. When you are put into a spotlight, which I'm not in a spotlight like they are, but it is character building to learn to be like, everyone is going to have opinions. You know, opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one.
Right.
And I cannot judge my value and worth based on what people think of me. And so I think it is a character building lesson that people in that space need to have. And again, I've been working on that. But I think that one thing that I wanted to ask you is, Raquel, for me, I'm like, I love this person.
Me too.
This is a leather wearing, motorcycle riding, LGBTQIA plus, proud breath of fresh air. Breath of fresh air. I loved her. I loved Mel. I loved seeing, and that's the other thing too, because it's like, I like that we're seeing housewives that are a little bit more diverse and representative of the world that we live in. Because it's like, Jenna doesn't need to be the token gay person on the cast. You know what I mean? Like, there's plenty of other people in that community that are amazing and fabulous and worthy of being on TV. So I'm glad that we did get to see that. But another interesting thing that I wanted to bring up was, so Rebecca Minkoff is a new cast member. And so she identifies as both Jewish and a Scientologist. Did you know that?
No. Okay.
So let me read you what I found out doing a little research. And I want to hear your thought. She says she refers to the church as more of a self-improvement philosophy. So she says that her religion is Judaism, but the church is more of a self-improvement philosophy, which, knowing what Scientology stands for, that is a wild statement to me. But I find that very interesting. What do you think?
I have no idea. I don't really know. Like, what? There's not really like a clear like what makes a Jew, right? Because we're like an ethnicity. Many people have considered us a race. of religion. So it's so many things. So like you can be culturally Jewish and you can even follow pieces of the Jewish religion and then maybe have, I don't know, alternative practices. I have no idea. It's a very, like, Scientology is very foreign to me. I know very little about it. It seems really scary, the levels the church goes to protect their reputation, which makes them look worse. It just makes them look terrible.
Leah Remini did this whole series about Scientology, and I watched it several times because Leah Remini used to be a Scientologist and she really loved it. And when she was on King of Queens, Kirstie Alley was on the show. I watched King of Queens. And so I know a little bit about this. And so then she found out what was going on within Scientology and she has made it her mission to talk about this. And she has received nothing but death threats and harassment, and the quote unquote church of Scientology, which they had it categorized as a church to get tax breaks. Allegedly. My point is, I know enough about Scientology that I could probably do a whole episode on this. But the one interesting thing related to Rebecca Minkoff and her dad in Scientology, this is going to blow your mind. In 1995, her dad was a doctor. Dr. Minkoff was the doctor of a woman named Lisa McPherson, who died after she was held by the church for 17 days following a minor accident. Oh, it gets worse. The church convinced her not to seek medical care, and they convinced Dr. Minkoff to prescribe her Valium without examining or speaking to her. She died. She died on church property, and Dr. Minkoff was only fined $10,000 and had his medical license suspended for 1 year. Yeah. I'm That's like, wild. I can't get on board with this. I can't. No. I mean, unless she's a dazzling human being, I cannot get on board with that bag of bullshit, because that is the wildest thing. And this is all online. So Google it, check it out, look at it yourself. That is wild. All right. Shall we move on to Real Housewives of Orange County?
Yes.
Okay. So
loving it.
Loving it. Me too. It is giving, honey. And I don't know about you, but last episode felt so chock full of information that I had a lot of notes. Usually I'll have about 3 slides, and then this one I had a lot. So I just wanted to read what I wrote about Alexis Bellino.
Okay.
If you send an olive branch and it's not accepted, and you proceed to throw a temper tantrum about it not being accepted, you were never sorry in the first place, and it's a sign that this is not an apology and it's manipulation.
Yeah, that's obvious.
I mean, but I just needed to clinically read her because that is insane. And so Emily was spot on when she said, Alexis continues to behave in unkind ways and contradictory ways, and then demands forgiveness that, quite frankly, she doesn't deserve. Alexis said, I have tried so hard. And I wrote in all caps, where? Where have you tried so hard? I was like, girl, bye. And then we're subjected to a Johnny J interview, which is just, again, it's this contradictory behavior. It's like, you don't want to be in the spotlight, but you're talking to people. You're now in an official confessional talking about the lawsuit. When Alexis claimed that she's done, please let this be true, because the audience has been done for quite some time.
Yeah, I'm glad John is showing his face on camera. I think it's unfair to kind of send his girlfriend, or now fiance, into the battlefield alone, equipped with like not all of the facts. He, I think, takes advantage of Alexis, and how much Alexis stands up for him. And I think he needs to stand up for himself and say what he thinks and not have her be his mouthpiece. So she has made many, many mistakes, but like this is really at the root of it coming from him.
Yeah. And I mean, that's an interesting perspective. I just dislike, so many sirens.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Here, it's okay. No. Don't. Sorry for what?
You should have heard it on January 6th.
Oh, gee. I could not imagine.
Horrible.
Oh, my gosh, you poor thing. Okay. I bristle at what you said about John because I just dislike him so much. But you're right, practically. You're right, practically speaking, that everyone has a right to share their truth. I just can't stand him. I want him away from my screen. And like, you're not sharing your truth. You're just trying to build a case to make you not look like the idiot that you are. But I mean, yeah, fair point.
I just want to hear from him because this is all coming from him and we're hearing it via Alexis and it doesn't always make sense. And not that it would make sense coming from him, but I would rather him, like, he should be taking the blame and the fault for all of it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, but Alexis, she throws herself into this drama triangle. So I have no empathy for her. Like, give me a break.
No, I think she thought this was going to go differently. And I think she's really upset about the not being able to like film. Like, I think she thought if I bring enough, they'll make me full time. They'll follow my family. Like, it'll all work out. And what she just didn't realize was like, she's being very cruel while she's doing it. And
and not a good person because you're not being a good human when you're doing one thing and saying another. That's crazy making. So you're saying, you're reading Shannon, you're yelling at her, you're doing all these things, and then you're sending her an olive branch. Those behaviors don't match. They are incongruent.
But
so
that's how she's always been. Like, especially when she talks about, and I hate to like be critical, but like of her religion, it doesn't all kind of fit neatly. And especially now that, like, and I don't know what church she belongs to, but previously when she was married to Jim Bellino, the kinds of things that they would say were pretty awful about like LGBTQ people and like other things like that. And then now she's like, oh, I'm like totally on the side of like LGBTQ people. And so,
it's like, girl, where? When did that happen? Please?
I think she's able to have this like cognitive dissonance in a way where, and then also sometimes when people sort of, and I don't like to say like weaponize their Christianity, but the only person I've really seen do it on Bravo, like routinely, is Taylor Ann Green, who used to date Shep. So she would,
yes, you're right,
like, apologize and then assume the apology had to be accepted because of I think what she's been taught about forgiveness in the church, in her church, and what they talk about forgiveness. And I don't think, and there is a cognitive dissonance there. Like, you can mess around with your best friend's ex, but if you apologize, that makes it all okay. And I feel like there's like a similarity with Alexis where she just thinks, but I said I'm sorry, or I said I want to move forward. Like, why can't we do that? That's sort of what I've been taught. Like, once you do something bad, you just ask for forgiveness and it's given. It like misses a few steps in the forgiveness process.
A few million steps, because the forgiveness process is really about us. What I've learned in a lot of my clinical settings is that forgiveness and making amends is for us, not for the other person. Really, number one. And number two, forgiveness and apologizing isn't even about how the other person, whether they take it or don't. It really should have nothing to do with the other person. It should be about us, about ownership, about accountability, about making amends, doing the right thing. And so, yes, I do feel that there is and Alexis also said there was this clip going around from an old reunion about how she said she wouldn't feel safe with a woman president.
Yeah.
And I was like, girl, bye. Get this woman off my screen before I lose it. I didn't want her on my screen the first time. I don't want her on my screen now. And I just felt like, because here's the thing. If you truly are an ally, these sexist, misogynistic, anti-LGBTQIA comments that she's previously made, that's not allyship. That's just not what it is. And so, I can appreciate that she's learning how to do this different because she has a trans child. But I also, it just really bugs me. It gets me heightened. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I'm looking up because there is a concept in Judaism that like is related to forgiveness, but it's not, it's called teshuvah, which means repentance. And it means like a return to God. And it's a huge theme of Yom Kippur, which is coming up in the next week. And so it's just very interesting. Like, there are different steps you have to take in order to get teshuvah. And so you're supposed to like ask people for forgiveness, but you're also supposed to like examine the ways in which your behavior affects other people and affects like the world around you.
I love that. Yes, that's great. Yes, that's beautiful.
It's more complicated
Thank you for sharing
than that.
with
And
us. Well, of course.
And I don't claim to like that it makes sense, but just like, and I just haven't seen, and I don't want people to think I'm criticizing the religion of Christianity because it is also so broad. There are so many sects of Christianity and interpretations of it. And I would say the majority of housewives identify as Christian and don't engage in this kind of like, for me, what I feel is kind of like unusual and sort of assuming that anytime you apologize that it must be granted. That is a bizarre take on it from my perspective. And maybe it has nothing to do with religion. I just feel like in Taylor Ann Green's case, I feel like it does. And so then with Alexis and just how she's kind of sold her, she's put herself out there as like, this is who I am. It's all about Christianity, Jesus, you know, forgiveness, that kind of thing. And I think that's what she led with her reconciliation with Tamra. It was like they had some sort of deep conversation and it was like, okay, like all is forgiven. Let's move forward. And they had done terrible, horrible things to each other. However, it wasn't as recent. I think with Shannon, you know, if this was 5 years from now, it would be a different story, but it's active. They're actively in a conflict right now where her boyfriend is suing Shannon and likely talking to the press via Alexis. However, I don't know if it's Alexis's fault because John Jansen, like Shannon pointed out, went straight to people when they broke up and talked to people. And that was before he'd ever met Alexis. So I think that, I like to put a lot of blame on John Jansen and a little bit less on Alexis. I'm not a fan of her. I don't need to see her on my screen anymore. She's not been proven to be authentic in any way, shape, or form. I'm really sad that we met her this way because I actually don't know if this is who she is. I feel like she's a chameleon. And so if you put her in the right environment, she might actually be lovely. But if you put her in a toxic environment, she becomes toxic. And I think that is what the relationship that she is in right now. It is toxic to have to profess your love on Instagram. It's weird. It's not
so weird. You know what I think about Alexis? And so, but to your point, I grew up Catholic, and I think it's more than fair to say that Alexis and Taylor Ann Green both weaponized their religion. I think that's fair to say. A lot of these housewives, they do weaponize very sacred things to try to be right or get their needs met or whatever it is. And so I think that's a fair statement. But I also think that Alexis is a tool for the patriarchy. And in that, I mean, she is the typical woman who will be like, only men as my president, and I'm going to be a mouthpiece for my man. And so it's like as a tool, and then she dates tools and becomes like their mouthpiece. And so I think Alexis can be, I don't think she's Satan in a smock, but I think she needs to go away, find a personality that is consistent for her. Don't make your man your personality. And be you, find out who you are, and then move from that place. This just all feels so icky, so disingenuous, and just like really ugly. Because as you said, the psychology behind what is happening right now with Shannon, and as you mentioned, it being fresh, people need to understand that point that you just made is so important. If you are in the middle of a contentious divorce breakup, you're going to behave differently in that moment than you are if it's 2 or 3 years down the road. So for sure, this is a fresh wound. And I do believe that Alexis and John wanted her to get that orange. And they thought this was going to be the way to do it. They thought Shannon was standing in their way, and they don't realize they're standing in their own way. And that bothers me too. It's like you're trying to make this a Shannon problem, but it's not a Shannon problem. It's also a YouTube problem.
Yeah.
You know?
And Shannon was very weak at the end of last season. Like, she didn't have a lot of allies in her corner. You know, she wasn't as strong. It almost seemed like, what is this show now that everyone seems to be okay but Shannon, you know, with everyone else. And little did they know that she would be very humbled by the DUI situation. And I that's what I've taken from it. She seems quite humbled. She says she's saying things You don't think so?
Did you see what Joel Kim Booster said?
Yes.
Okay. So
I don't know if he is a
Mandy
reliable
has some
narrator.
Thoughts on that. Okay. Girl, speak on it.
I'm saying, like, I don't know if he's a reliable narrator. If it was someone like Danny Pellegrino, you know, talking about that, like a person who is like very consistently beyond kind, like beyond the levels of like
he's amazing.
Basic decency. He is like a incredibly kind human who appears to me to be quite like in touch with reality.
Yeah.
Joel Kim Booster seems to have a lot of very strong opinions. And and I don't know if I should say this, but like according to his social media, he seems to like dabble in some recreational drugs. So if he's at a party, like a rap party, what is he? And the time that he went on like Instagram Live and posted things was like immediately following said party. I don't think he is
the boots on the ground.
No, I don't think he was. And a lot of people, right? Like if I went to a party and I was drinking or I was using drugs or whatever it is, like that's not when you pick up your phone. That's not when you comment on something. And it's clear that he was like in the throes of anger. And I also don't know how clear like he was seeing everything, right?
So
I'm not trying to defend her. I think that it is very possible that she engaged in really obnoxious behavior as the talent often does. From my understanding, they act like complete divas. I know plenty of politicians who behave that way that you may like. And then ones that you may not like that actually are really lovely people.
Right. So,
you know, it kind of goes both ways, but the way in which he did it had such vitriol that I was like, are we seeing this clearly?
So, and for those listening, I want to explain what it is we're talking about if you haven't seen it, because that's such a good point, Mandy, is that Joel Kim Booster posted an Instagram story that was like, people will force me to take this down, but I don't care. He called Shannon a drunk. He said that she was a pathetic drunk. Thank you. He said that she was awful to people and that so were her daughters, which that I was like, oh, you brought in the kids? That is what made me feel like, wow. But you're right. So for those of you who don't know who Kim Joel Booster is, please look on Instagram online because he has been on Watch What Happens Live. And to your point, Mandy, he has very strong opinions and he's very harsh in his expression of that. And so what you're saying is this can be a classic case of two things can be true, right? I don't think anyone believes for 1 minute that Shannon is like humble in any way, shape, or form, okay? I don't think any of us believe that. So yes, like you said, can she and other people in this space be divas? Yes, I believe that. But also I think that he went too hard. And what does that say about you as a professional? Because he was a producer on the show that they were filming. Oh my God, you're right. He was the host.
Yeah,
you're right.
That's what.
No, you're right. He was the host of this show that Shannon was on. Do you remember what it was called?
It's like Love Hotel or something like that.
Yes.
And it's Hotel. Shannon, Giselle, Ashley Darby, and Luann. And my understanding, like Shannon was asked about this at one of her like Shannon and Vicky shows. And she said she was really shocked by it because earlier that day, Joel had tears in his eyes saying how happy he was for her. So, like maybe she's unaware of how her behavior comes off to others. That's a very real possibility.
Not Shannon,
but
not possible.
But like for him to be that angry and then to say like, I hope she suffers and I feel bad. I feel sorry for John Jansen and what she put him through as if like that excuses
as if John
his
is a victim. Yeah.
It just of it reeked of like a lot of misogyny to me. And also him criticizing her for like, you're only known for your like bad relationships. And I'm like, okay, well, that is a housewife. You're known for whatever happens on camera, which is ups and downs. In Shannon's case, mainly downs. But, you know, like, do you like these shows? Do you care about these shows? Do you care about these women? Or are you just there to watch and mock them as if, like, I just didn't like how it came off at all. And if it was a different person, even saying the same kinds of things, I think I maybe would take it differently. It's like another person who has strong opinions, but I think is more positive is Matt Rogers. Like Matt Rogers has like extremely strong opinions. So if he says something about a housewife, it's through the prism in which he views that housewife prior to doing something with them. So like, I want to know, like, did Joel Booster have an issue with Shannon before he knew her, just from watching her on TV? Like we all have, you know, housewives that we like have a little bit of a bone to pick with, you know,
like a preconceived notion.
That's sort of my read on it. The time of day that he posted it after a party where most people were drinking and, you know, who knows what else. Like, come on.
And to your point, you know, gay men can be misogynistic. You know,
I think the
LGBTQIA
can be misogynistic. You're talking about Alexis. You know, I can be misogynistic. We all have it in us, you know. It just came out very viscerally from him. And I was kind of like, is this a reliable narrator? Because what we've been hearing from Shannon's co-stars on the show in general, and like from Gina, even like a week ago or something, was saying, or even this week was on Nick Vile's podcast and was asked about it. And she said, it's just very shocking to me because the way I've seen Shannon behave both on and off camera has been very different than years prior. That like she does seem to be doing a lot of internal work, and that she does, she has been humbled, and that she treats people differently than how she treated them in the past. And it seems very consistent on and off camera is from Gina's perspective. And I take that as someone, you know, Gina was very critical of Shannon in prior years. So for her to say that now, I'm like, oh, and someone who's around her more, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So I just don't know how. I don't
take
know.
It with a grain of salt. Take it with a grain of salt.
I'm like, you know, it certainly is not going to prevent me from watching the show or cheering on Shannon. You know?
Right. And to your point is when you have someone like Gina, who she's sober, she's been through it. She was if she can be on board with Shannon, well, then I think we need to take her lead because she's the only one who actually has a real knowledge and insight behind the scenes. And like, I trust Gina. So, but to your point is that when celebrities say things, it's like how you say it lends to your credibility or not. And when you throw a temper tantrum and you're nasty and you're awful about it, well, that just makes you look like an asshole. So I think that made him really look like an asshole. And I'm glad Shannon addressed it.
I think Jen and Katie have cemented themselves as like phenomenal cast members on this show. They are lovely. Katie's facial expressions alone could be a housewife. I am here for her face alone. Like these little faces that she makes and they just like close up on her. And she's just like,
yeah.
You know, it's amazing.
She is so quietly funny. Her confessionals have me legitimately laughing out loud. And like how she whispered about, she was talking about something in the confessional and then it was written like really, really tiny because she was like whispering like she wasn't on camera. I think despite her rough start with the Dubrow picking a battle that to me didn't need to be picked, but you know, which Gina also was involved in that. I really, really like Katie. And initially, Emily said on Jeff Lewis Live, which by the way, Jeff Lewis Live has become like another housewife. We're seeing all of these Jeff Lewis Live. He's like creating drama on the podcast, which that's like what he loves to do. But
something I've also noticed is that with these podcasts, what some of the housewives get upset about is that, let's say you and I are on a podcast, which we are right now, and you say something defamatory about another person. Or about someone that I am on a show with, me saying, oh, I don't agree with that isn't enough. You like have to fight each other in order to like, so for example, on New York, Brynn was very upset. Aaron was like, well, I don't think she has a sugar daddy. And then Jeff Lewis says, I think someone's paying her. And then she gets pissed off, but Aaron didn't really, in my opinion, do anything wrong. She was like, I don't think so. Right. And she wasn't like part of the conversation.
Right. But Jeff Lewis also knows what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing. And he knows that this is going to get him airtime, which it has. And so it's smart and strategic on his part. But yes, we have to the game of telephone is problematic for a reason because things get diluted and it just, and then it just gets out of hand. I totally agree.
I also would defend Ryan for how he was on the podcast. I haven't listened to the whole thing, but the clips they showed us did not say what Tamara was telling us. It was it was the host of the podcast that was making derogatory and defamatory statements about Tamara. It was not Ryan. He was not doing that. So for all of his faults and all of the things about him, I don't think the podcast was the thing. And he only went on one. Right? Like after being trashed for many, many months by Tamara, who has like the loudest and largest platform, for him to go on one podcast and her to like be livid about it is absurd.
That's such a good point, because it's like she has Two T's in a Pod, which is a huge podcast. It's so listened to. And it's like, you're going to talk about this stuff on the reg, but he goes on once and talks about it, and that's not okay. So here's the thing. Don't make me defend Ryan, because that makes me mad. I know. Don't make me defend this man, but you are right about that. He didn't say it. And just because Ryan generally, I am genuinely confused, because Jen Pedranti, I think, is one of the all-time great housewives. She's emotionally intelligent. She's sweet. She's kind, but she knows how to stand up for herself. She just seems like a good human. Why is she with Ryan? Make that make sense to me.
She needs to be taken care of.
Boom. That's it.
And someone who and she's like a weaker type of, like, she doesn't have like a strong, like, oh, we have to do it this way. We have to, like, she doesn't have like strong principles in the same way. So like it's almost like if, he can take over, oh, we're going here for dinner. This is what we're ordering. This is, you know what I mean? I think she like kind of likes it. It's like one less decision for her to have to make for herself. She's like she's like a go along to, like, get along to go along, whatever that phrase is. Like, that's the kind of person I think she is. And so people who are a little more like, I'm also that way sometimes, or I like don't really care where we go to dinner. I don't feel like I need to choose. Like, I'm just, you guys choose, I'll show up. Right. And I think she has that attitude about a lot of things, and that could be part of it. But also she needs, like, she doesn't just want a partner. She needs a caretaker. She's had a caretaker. Her parents were her caretaker, specifically probably her dad. Right. And then she immediately, got married very young, in her early 20s, was with that guy, Will, for a very long time. And he was her caretaker. Right. And but he didn't show her the love. And what Ryan is showing her, the affection, is like she saw Will give affection to her children, but not to her in the same way. And so now it's like, oh, she's getting the affection. He is overly affectionate. He's always talking about how he wants to bang her, how hot she is. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like she can't get that mixed up. It's like, oh, I'm not sure he likes me, So she,
So she's a human that wants to be loved, and that she's getting love and security, which I think is an excellent, excellent point. What was wild to me, so for those listening who don't know this, Tamara is being sued by Ryan for her defamatory comments.
Still is?
I believe so.
Oh, okay.
He served her, and I didn't hear anything about it being retracted.
Did he serve her? I saw a photo, and I was like, you don't just leave papers at the door. Like, you have to physically...
Someone explained that. I thought that too. Someone explained it. And again, this is the game of telephone on the internet, right? So a content creator explained that to me, is that apparently he went with police to drop it. And so it really was him serving her. But so for what Mandy's talking about is it was this picture of papers being served to the door. But traditionally, when you're served papers for a lawsuit, it has to be to the person in person, and you have to say you've been served. Like, there are rules and regulations. And so from what I've heard, though, is he really did serve her. And I didn't hear that has been retracted.
Okay.
But
this is a case for the Bravo docket.
It is a case for the Bravo docket. And listen, they may have already talked about this. And by the way, I've talked to the Bravo docket. We are going to collab on something. We just have to find time in everyone's schedules. But maybe I'll reach out to them and I'll ask them specifically about that, and then I'll report back. But and then the episode of Watch What Happens Live, it was taken off of Peacock for legal reasons.
Oh, and I watched it. Okay, I saw it, and they cut the part that she said.
Okay,
so it's really awkward where she's talking, and then all of a sudden it's like Andy asking another question to the other guest.
Okay.
So I think they just took it off so that they could cut the part where she says, like, I my business makes more money than like you stole or something like that, right?
I watched it live and it was like a read that Tamara was trying to give, but she fumbled it and also got herself sued out of it, which is such a Tamara move.
Yeah.
She was like saying it and then she stumbled and tripped over her words. But what she was trying to say is that the money that was stolen from this baseball player by the friend, not Ryan, by the friend, this person who has
the friend the translator?
The translator?
So this baseball player had money stolen from him up to like $16 million or even more from the translator. The translator was the one
then
who
it must be, that must be Ryan's friend, because last night in the episode, what they talk about was how, well, first of all, Ryan acts like he has no idea what anyone's talking about, which irritated me. But then, so Emily does this brilliant thing where she like pretends to be confused when she's asking questions, which by the way is a brilliant technique. And it's very disarming to just pretend you're confused. I've used that in therapy before. So Ryan says that it was their best friends who were involved in that lawsuit, not him. And he says, quote, "We were fortunate to enjoy those fruits." He said that last night on the episode of OC. And I thought, that's a wild way to categorize indirectly benefit from stolen monies. That is a wild way to say that. But he did.
The translator is not his friend.
The
friend, I think he said his name was Matt or something on the, this Matt. Translator's name is, where is it? I just looked it up. Ipe Mizuhara.
Thank you. Thank you for that fact checking in real time. Moderator Mandy.
Well, I think that this friend Matt and Ryan were involved in some sort of bookie type thing. And
Ryan did also say
was like repaying gambling debts or something like that. I don't understand it all because like some gambling is legal and then some isn't legal, and I don't really know all the differences. But it sounds
they were clear last night that he is a bookie. He said that on a live TV, and then Gina's husband, or Katie's husband, looks and says, "Is that legal?" Like to Katie,
exactly,
and they're all like, "No." So it's like he's trying to say that he's not doing anything wrong, but he just admitted to doing something illegal on national television.
Yeah,
and that was wild for me. I was like,
I think you can be a bookie in certain circumstances. Like, for example, I play fantasy football and I give $100 into the pot to play. And at the end of the season, it's doled out into like first, second, and third prizes. And like the person who is running our league is like the league commissioner is like essentially a bookie in that situation. But because it's fantasy football, and I think the amount, like, I don't know what makes that legal, but I know that is legal. I think it's, so I don't know that it's always illegal. I think like whatever the amounts he was doing, and then sometimes with like stolen money, obviously. Like, I don't know if he knew it was stolen or anything like that, but like he was doing was definitely illegal, and he has flipped and he has become a witness for the government. So
that's
anyone
that's
saying that like he's going to jail 100%, like I'm like, are you kidding? Like, I don't know. He may not see any jail time for flipping. He may get like a reduced sentence, but there are plenty of people who get, for flipping, like he may not be the real target of the investigation.
Well, right. And so the fact that you said is he what I read is that he received some sort of immunity because of cooperating. And so because he's not the big fish, but he's swimming in a pond, right?
Yeah, that he shouldn't be swimming in.
Correct. And so I think that, and that's where I question Jen, where it's like, love is great, but like, I think she overcorrected a little bit. And it was just, again, it was wild to see Ryan talk about benefiting from stolen monies in that way. But do you have anything else before we wrap? We didn't get to talk about Gina and Heather and
Emily and Heather.
but
I'm glad that got resolved. I appreciated Emily speaking her mind. I do think that there is something to be said, though, for Heather being able to collect herself, sit with it, and then come back once she is kind of like emotionally regulated.
Yeah, I mean, that's the appropriate thing to do.
But they're acting like, oh, she's getting the perfect words, so she can give the perfect apology. And I'm like, no, I mean, sometimes, screaming back and forth at each other is not the most effective way. And she clearly got riled up. She shouldn't have, right? She should have been able to hear her friend and it not get to that point, but it did. And so I think this is a better way to deal with it. Not excusing Heather or the like nasty comments she made in the other episode a few weeks ago.
That made me so mad.
Yeah.
That made me so angry.
Really, really not nice. But does it make her less authentic because she's a little more polished because she wants to show up at a conversation having thought through something? Maybe, but people will say things like that about Dr. Jackie on Married to Medicine. And I'm like, what's wrong with that? Like, that's what I do. Like, is that a problem? Like,
no. Effective communication requires a culling of our egos and our irrational emotions. And sometimes to do that, we have to step away, take a beat, and then respond. That is the way to have effective communication. But Emily was on Watch What Happens Live, and she said that she felt Heather was saying the right words. And she felt there was an authentic genuineness missing. And again, that's her experience. Who am I to say, but it's a classic case of two things can be true, which is usually the case. That is an appropriate response to a very escalated situation, to remove yourself, to take a beat and then come back. And also, could it have been inauthentic based on just trying to say, who knows? Who knows? I mean, Heather does tend to be very self-produced in some ways. But anyway, Mandy, thank you so much for the extra 10 minutes and such a lovely episode. Please let everybody know. I mean, I think, most of my folks know, but please let everybody know where they can find you. And please follow Mandy. People are so stingy with follows. Follow this wonderful human being. Follow her at Mandy Slutsker on Instagram. Do it right now. I'm telling you, go do it.
And it's really easy to find me because you just have to put Mandy like with a Y and then just write slut. And I come up and it works every time. You can find me. It's amazing. But my podcast is called Is This Real Life with Mandy Slutsker. It comes out every Sunday. It's focused on the Housewives, but some of the other Bravo shows. And I love having kind of in-depth conversations about these shows. I love hearing differences of opinion on the shows. I think it's really like fascinating. Like if anyone is supporting Alexis Foligno, that would be interesting to hear. I would like that. I like hearing, because we all come at this from different perspectives. I find that interesting. So thank you. I think, as always, for having me on as a guest. I love coming on.
Oh my God. Well, and so, what I want to say is that what I love about your podcast is, and love about you in general, is you do try to really look for every perspective, which is something I try to do too, but you really do it with such an earnestness and with a thirst for knowledge that, I don't know, you're just a wonderful person. I love your podcast. So please, everyone, follow Mandy. Is This Real Life with Mandy Slutsker? And listen, I mean, I'm not gonna drop any bombs today, but there's more to come from Mandy and I. Is it fair to say that?
Yes.
Okay. Tea is dropped. There is more to come from Mandy and I. So stay tuned for that. So for now, we will say thank you. Take care of yourselves and each other, and ta-ta for now. Disclaimer. Posts are not intended to diagnose, treat, or provide medical advice. Your Abish Therapist is for entertainment and informational purposes only. The podcast, my opinions, and posts are my own and not associated with past or present employers, any organizations, Bravo TV, Greyheart Productions, or any other television network. The information in YBT podcast and on its social media is provided for general informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat. Please do not act or refrain from acting based on anything you read, see, or hear on YBT podcast or associated social media. Communicating with YBT via email and or social media does not form a therapeutic alliance. Melissa, operator of YBT, is unable to provide any therapeutic advice, treatment, or feedback.